Going to make sure that everybody here and everybody who watches this at some point really understands what is going on with the 2% rule, why it's so important. And I'm going to show you visually what happens when you require your stop loss and your 2% rule to dictate your position size. Okay, so stick with me here. I've got thanks, Taco. I've got a setup here. We're just pretend this is Litecoin for a second, because that was the last thing I think I used as an example the last time we looked at the position sizing sheet. Now I've copied this over, so this is not the old one. You'll notice the difference here is this pie chart. Well, I've set this pie chart up to pick up my total acceptable risk, which is this $30 here in red, and the rest of the position. So it takes the total position size and subtracts that risk from it and tells me what the rest of the position is. Now this gives you a way to visually see, in this example, I'm starting with an example that we have all thought of before. What if I put 100% of my capital, because in this example I have $1,500, my position size is going to be $1,500. If I put 100% of my capital onto a position, and I set my stop loss at 2% away from my entry, okay, what does that do? Well, first of all, it means I can only tolerate a drawdown of 2%. So in this example, if Litecoin, if I enter at 42.33, if it pops down to 41.48, I'm going to stop out. And I have to honor the 2% rule if I enter with my entire capital lot. Everybody with me so far? I don't see any questions popping up yet. This should be a process that everyone has pretty much thought of. Zach, you can actually use most of your capital because of the low stop. Well, in this example, I am using 100% of my starting capital, and I'm setting my stop loss at 2%. That means that my stop loss at 2% will equal 2% of my capital. Okay? I'm gonna try and pause as I go through this, because the numbers can really throw people for a loop, and you might have to go back and replay this when I get going here in a second. So in this example, my stop loss drawdown from my entry is equal to 2% of my capital, and it has to be because my position size is equal to my total capital. Now, the inverse of this would be if I put a stop loss so far down on the chart, say $1, that now what happens is nearly all of my position will be at risk, because my stop loss is 99% away from my entry. Now, if I am coming from the angle of my stop loss and my 2% dictate my position size, the moment I put my stop loss at nearly 99% away from my entry, now my position size can only be about equal to my 2% of my capital. That's all I can put on, because I have to risk all of it with a stop loss that far down. Or for example, if I had no stop loss, my position size would be exactly equal to my 2% if I was going to honor it. Everybody with me so far? If you were to trade with no stop loss and you wanted to honor the 2% rule, your position size would have to be equal to 2%, because it's all at risk without a stop loss. Now, what I really want to illustrate, I'm going to back up here to this example where I put all of my position down. As you start to drop your stop loss, as you give your trade more room for the market to move against you, so I'm going to drop to $40. Look what happens visually. You can see with a pie chart. Look what happens to the amount that your 2% total becomes relative to your total position. As my position size goes down, this $30 is going to take up more of the pie relative to my total position, and it should. Because if my stop loss is dropping, my position size needs to drop in order to stick to my 2% rule. I don't want the market moving further down to cause me any more loss than if it went down $1, $2, $3. I want my losses to stay the same. So to keep my losses the same, equal to 2%, my position size has to decrease as I widen my stop loss. Everybody with me so far? Hopefully the visual is helping some of you that have a hard time just seeing the abstract numbers on paper. You can visually see as I drop the stop loss in this example, my position size has to go down, and my 2% is now taking up more of my total position. Because my 2% doesn't change, if my position size gets smaller, my 2% is going to take up a bigger piece of the total position. Let's say I give myself a really wide stop. I'm only going to be able to put $100 on of my $1,500. My stop's all the way down at 30. And this percent of the pie is actually telling me what the drawdown is as well. Because your drawdown is always going to be equal to what you get stopped out with of your position. So I know 30 off of 42 is a 29% drawdown without going back to my chart. Now we're cooking with a little bit of gas. We're seeing some relationships here, hopefully. If you're not, go back and watch that a couple times till it gets into your head and the light bulb goes on. Oh, the reason why I set this Excel sheet up this way is because your stop loss from your TA and 2% of your capital needs to dictate your position size in order for you to always honor that 2% in every trade you take. Okay, let that sink in for a minute. Let's take a look at Bitcoin. Let's pretend for a moment I'm going to take an entry where we are now. So about 87.43, 87.20, 87.20. Now bear with, because these numbers are all going to be funky. Let's pretend I have no stop loss. We can say I still have $1,500 capital. Let's say I'm going to be very aggressive, and I'm going to put my stop loss under this wick and these moving averages. And I'm going to turn my entry green just for sake of making this easier on my eyes. Green entry, red stop. My stop I just placed, 79.06. So with that stop of my TA, with a position size of with a capital starting amount of $1,500 and with an entry of 87.20, I can put $321 down to buy 0.0368 Bitcoin. With this stop loss in place, I will only risk $30. In this example, I have given myself 9.3% drawdown on the chart, and we can check it. 9.3%. So in an example where I enter here with a 9.3% distance to where I will exit, because at that point I'm like, no, they're going lower. This is the big drop. We're out of the way. I need to get out. The most I can put on so that I only lose $30 is $321. So the big point I am trying to drive home for everybody who's listening, for the recording on the Foundations and in the Lounge archive, the 2% rule means that no matter what trade you take, when you put a stop loss on that trade, the maximum position you should ever take relative to that stop loss should never result in more than a 2% loss. It does not mean that your position size is equal to 2%. Sure, Zach, I'll drop a share link in here for you guys so you can have the pie chart as well. Oh, they changed it on me. What's going on here? Just in case. Change. Anyone with the link will let you view. There we go. They made it a little different on me. Bear with me. All right. So if anybody wants to borrow this chart and get a copy, there you go. You can get a copy with the pie chart on it. And as you adjust your numbers, you'll see the amount of drawdown change. And the drawdown is the amount of your 2% that fits inside your position. That's how I think about it. I think about whatever my position size is, This 2% amount, it has to fit inside the amount of distance from here to here. This space on my chart has to equal my 2% amount. I hate when they do the big text on me. Let's make it small. There we go. Okay, this drawdown in here, hopefully I'm driving this point home, has to fit, I have to fit my $30, my 2% capital amount inside that space. The moment I force myself to do that, that means I have a maximum amount of position that I can put where this pullback from my entry will result in the 2% rule. Now, Zach says, would you include fees? That is a personal choice, Zach. It depends on how you're going to account for those fees. It depends on your tax structure. Are those fees tax deductible? Are you going to negate them at the end of the year to some degree? Are the fees significant? Are they small? What frequency are you trading? Because that'll affect your amount of fees in the exchange. So some people will wrap the fees in, and you could do that. You could easily put something on here where you put up, if you're good with Excel, if anybody really wanted me to give it a try sometime, you could send me a direct message, but you could set it so that it puts the percentage in here of what your fee is going to be equal. So let's say my USD size is this times 0.01% fee and get that total. So you could do that. But what you are saying with the 2% rule, William, essentially your potential loss on a trade is 2% of your portfolio. Yes. Yes. You do not put 2% of your portfolio on a position size willy-nilly, blindly, regardless of your stop. That wouldn't make sense, and it wouldn't account for your stop loss and your 2% dictating your position size. Your potential loss on one trade should never exceed 2%. And that simple act allows you to make 50 trades in a row incorrectly and still have an account up until that 50th trade goes wrong. The odds of you picking 50 trades wrong in a row are very low. Just statistically, with a random entry and a decent plan put into place, I mean, if you go and you read Van Tharp's Monte Carlo simulations and many others who have done them, random simulations, I mean, it is very, very unlikely that you will get 50 losing trades in a row if you are using any kind of system at all. Now, if you're just going blind, maybe you'll get lucky. Zach says I was getting charged 0.2% and now it's 0.5%. Yeah. So you may want to put a calculation in there where you say this amount times 0.2%, and that gives you your final amount that you would want to calculate. And so maybe you would change this in your example, and don't anybody download right the second I do this because this is going to affect the algorithm. Maybe what you need to do, Zach, is go 0.0198 and pull like a 2% out of your 2%, for example. That would kind of offset your fees. You could calculate exactly what that amount is if you want to figure that out as well. Okay. Going back to this example, here's my entry, here's my drawdown, here's my position size. Now, what happens if I pull my stop in? The moment that I decide to pull my stop up, let's say I'm going to just be psychological and go to just under 8,200. For some reason, I just decided, no, you know what? I see the top of this little spot here. So say I looked left and I went just underneath that, 80.64. The moment I pull my stop in, my position size will go down, and the amount of my position size will go up. The amount of pie that my risk takes up will go down. That's what I was trying to say. I apologize if I just confused anyone. This stuff gets real. What's the word I'm thinking of? Real tedious, real technical, real specific, finicky, picky, persnippety, any of those adjectives. So you really have to stop and do it slowly Take your time, be conscientious of what you're doing, be cognizant of this whole process you're trying to unfold. You want the technical analysis to dictate a safe spot for your entry, a safe spot for you to hide behind, some kind of TA that has a support in your way to barrier you from exiting, that says if they cross that and exit you, it's for good reason. And that distance combined with your 2% is what needs to dictate your position size. 2% meaning the total loss on this trade should never exceed 2% of your total capital. I think I've driven that point home. I think I got it. The last thing I want to do with you guys is just a little bit of fun. I've played around with fibs a long time. Many of you have as well. Scott's probably going to come back and he's gonna laugh a little bit at me. But if you have been playing with fibs and you've gotten pretty good about figuring, okay, you know, I want to see if they come in hot here and this was my job, you know, what's going on here? Okay, this was a mini cycle. They came back and then they went on and blasted it off. Okay, I can do that pretty well. A good next step to start working, and this may crack a few brains here. Take the same principle and apply it in reverse. Pretend for a moment we're going to take a short. Where did this was the turnaround buying heading up. Where did they pop back around to go down? That would be this lovely candle here. And we'll try the wick, somewhere in the wick. And then what we want is for them to have some kind of line up of significance, something that makes sense. Now maybe I need to have the whole wick in there. There we go. Now we're starting to make a little more sense. And what do you know? Fibs work to the downside. Now what's scary is if that's correct, and I tend to believe that's a little off, just because I've got retracements that would line up a little better with the body of these candles up here. That looks a little more plausible to me. There's my retracement down to a 618 and a potential flash crash, scare everybody, kill Bitcoin, it's never coming back. Fibs work in both directions. So I just wanted to throw that out there for some of the newbies who have been playing with the buying fibs, now that we're getting ready for something in the big picture. Because what's happening now in this monthly chart? What's happening? Where's my... Taco snake? Kyle. What's happening is we've come up against the top of this downtrend channel, if you will. We've rejected a little bit, and that was the short trade setup. And they broke and hooked it for another ad on that low time frame Scott showed. And now you've got all this room to head down inside of this type of a area. So it's not a bad idea to practice fibs to the downside and to start getting a handle for what they might look like. Because if you can get them to the downside, then you can come back and do them to the upside. And the last thing I'll show you is for people that are interested in practicing this, because this was something I found to be a really good exercise once I started to really get a handle on fibs. Some of you may or may not know, whoops, I'm throwing everything on the chart now. This handy dandy little guy down here. Boop. Now that may totally mess your head up. So if you are brand new, stay away. But if you are getting to that point where you're starting to go, I need something to really challenge my thinking, start trying these in the other direction and see what you find. And then you could turn it back and see if it makes sense. That one makes a little more sense. You might start to find a new way of doing things that changes your perspective. The more that you get out of your comfort zone, the more you are going to see new possibilities. Thank you, Wayne. Alt-I for invert. For those of you who like the keyboard shortcuts. So the last thing I'll leave you with, that was just a little bit of fun, just a friendly reminder. When you are trying to get into a position, you've done your TA, you've planned your entry, you've planned your stop loss, and you know what your 2% is. Use this calculation. It doesn't matter whether it's this Excel sheet specifically or not, and let your position size be dictated by your stop loss, which is drawn down from your entry, and your 2% amount. That way, no matter how much amount of position total you put on the board, whether you put $1,000, whether you put $1,500, whether you say, I know for a fact they are never going to stop me out now because they did a flash and they turned around it so I can put a really tight stop and put most of my position on, no matter what you do, make sure that position and that stop equate to a 2% maximum related to your total portfolio value loss. You never want to exceed 2% loss per trade. That's all the 2% rule means. I'll just manually modify sizing when I go through process. There you go. You can do that too, Zach. Absolutely, because they'll just tell you at the end what your position size is going to be, minus the fee. Simon, throwing one in front of a ticker when adding to your watch list, same result. Cool. One minus. Okay, that inverts it. Gotcha. I didn't know that either. Cool. If anybody has any questions about this, I don't think anybody's dropped any. I hopefully explained that as clearly as I could with a visual example that hopefully for some of you that may have struggled to conceptualize this, hopefully the visual gives you another tool to really see what's going on behind the scenes with your 2% amount fitting inside of that total position amount, no matter what your value of your trade ends up being at the end of the day. And with that, if Scott is back, let's check and see. I'll pass it back to him, but I don't know if he is because I haven't heard him yet. And if he is, he may be on mute and talking and I can't hear him. But if he's not, then let's do one more example until he gets back. Let's try our good old friend. And I'm going to use Gemini again. Ethereum. Oh, dang, I haven't touched this chart in a long time. And what do you know? They went straight to that. And then they fell off a cliff. Fun times. It does not matter what coin you are trading with the USD pairs. That calculator will work for all of them. Let's pretend for a moment that we got real lucky. We caught an entry at 180 on ETH because we said that's probably where they were going to come back and square up. I don't know. So my entry would have been 180. Let's say we want to be real safe, and we want to get all the way down below the last time they could, because maybe they're going to square up here and I'm real worried. So I'm just going to try and do a nice, maybe I'll even be real conservative, a nice scout here with a wide stop. What percentage is that? Because sometimes when you're down the lower numbers, good. Okay, like 20%. Cool. I know just from doing this so many times, if my drawdown is 20%, okay, think about this, 20%. That means my 2% has to fit inside of that 20%. So if you're good with ratios, 2 over 20, x over 100, you can already in your head start thinking, oh, I know where this is going to be going. Now, this is, where did I put 140? 141, we'll say, because it was 80 cents. My position size ends up being almost 10% of my starting capital because 2 over 20, 2% has to fit inside of 20, and 2 is 10% of 20. So my position size ends up being 10% of my capital because they're a proportion. All I am doing when I am adhering to this 2% rule is making sure that my proportion of my 2% to my position is relative to my total capital amount and my drawdown. It's all just a proportion. So those of you that are math nuts, that should kind of like click some gears up in there and give you alternate ways to attack this kind of setup. If you're not good with math, that's why you have a calculator. Practice it over and over. Play around with it. Try different stops. Try different setups. Say I want to be all the way down here. Let's say I want to be at $80 for my stop, and I'm going to be real far down. This is a long-term entry, and I don't care if they come way far back, but I still don't want to lose more than 2%. Now I can only put $50 on, and about half of my position is my 2% risk. So that's why my total ends up being about double my 2%. And actually, if I look at 180 and I say I'm going to put my stop loss halfway away, it's going to be exactly half. That might throw some of your brains into an aha moment. The more you play around with these relationships, the better you internalize them, the easier they become to conceptualize, the more you can execute quickly when the market is moving because you have a fundamental understanding of what's going on mathematically with this 2% rule. If you are still trying to wrap your head around this and understand what these calculations mean and exactly how these relationships are playing out, when the market does one of these candles, you're going to be sitting here panicking because you're going to say, well, I could put stop here, I could put it here, but I got to enter quickly. And then by the time you figured it out, you know, it's already snapped back up in here because we know they do these moves quick. They don't, I mean, those are daily candles, but we know they're not taking a whole day to snap back up there. I mean, this was a single 4-hour candle. It might have even been within a 1 hour that they snapped back. So if you had been watching really carefully, they had popped your entry or where you were looking, but you didn't have your stop planned ahead of time. You didn't have a good understanding of this. You're trying to do it in real time. You're struggling. Oh, I put my number in wrong. I entered at 97. Oh no, should I put my stop at 90? I don't know. I don't know if I want to put $4. I really want to put $200 on. Maybe I'll put my stop up higher, 95. No, that's okay. How do I get it to $200? Okay, now they're going down. Okay. Okay, and then oh crap, it's past my entry and they're leaving me behind. You cannot be trying to plan these things out as it's unfolding in real time unless you have an internal understanding of what's happening. If you are still, and this is the 4 stages of a trader, for those of you that are in the training, once you have internalized this, it becomes mechanical. It's automatic. It's second nature to you. Then you can spend your time on the chart because you're already calculating these things in your head. You can be in over here, looking at your chart going, if I entered here and I gave myself, come on, shift key, a 10% drawdown, so 184 to 165, that means that my 2% is going to fit into 10%, and my total position size is going to be about 20%. Now, if math is not your strong suit, that may have just thrown you for quite a loop, and you may need to go watch that a couple of times. That's okay. Take your time, because every time you do this, you are one step closer to getting it automatic, becoming a mechanical trader, and being able to execute with confidence, fast, quickly, in real time when they do those candles. Scott's not sitting here waiting to plan out a trade when it drops 40% in a single candle. He's already looked left. He's already done his chart work. He knows if they go down to this area, he already knows he wants to stop underneath that last swing. He's already got an idea of what percent that might be. So he already knows what a position size might potentially be that he can throw on if they give him that drop. You need to not just do it when it happens. You need to throw out simulations. You need to say, what if they drop down to my entry that I'm looking for at 88 and I put a stop at 70? What if that were to happen? I could put $140 on. Okay, I better be watching for that, because when it happens, I can throw $140 in there in 1 hour and then sit back and let it do its thing. without panic, without fear. Simon, I was trying this in a panic a while back, fat fingered an extra zero in the entry price and accidentally invested all my capital in one trade. That's what I'm talking about. That is exactly why you have to have this automatic internalized second nature. It has to be something you've done 100, 1,000, 10,000 times is the minimum amount you need to master a skill. 10,000 hours or 10,000 episodes of execution. Minimum. That's psychologically backed by psychological research. So if you've done this 10 times and you're like, I get it, you might want to go back and mess around with it a little more and really make sure that you get it. Because if you didn't get it before you saw this pie, you really didn't get it. This should be going on in your head. And if this isn't going on in your head, you're not at that stage yet where you should be jumping in on a whim.